Okay, so in this video we are going to learn how to make this simple water. Nothing too fancy, it's kind of nice. And the main star in the show is going to be the pixel processor. This is the water in question here. Come on, you. There we go. So this right here is that water we were just looking at. There's a lot of pixel processing going on, and a pixel processor is an amazing tool that they have in Substance, and as the name would imply, it processes pixels in any number of ways. I mean, animation is just one of the things you can do with it, but that's what we're going to be doing today. Now, I think before we get any deeper into the actual making of this water, we're going to do a little quick section on exactly what's going on with the pixel processor. So in order to do that, I made this other little quick thing here. I made a test pattern for myself. It's just, I find it easier to get a grip on sort of new concepts and figuring out what is going on. Even as I was building the water, I was using this to see, because especially when you start layering a bunch of different animations on top of each other, which is essentially what you're doing with water, it gets a little tricky just to see what it is that's going on the layer that you're working on. So sometimes I'll actually replace that particular layer with a test pattern like this just to give me an idea, you know, to separate it out from the rest of the animations, just to see what's going on. So that's what we're going to use here. Now, I kind of made one up here. We're going to do it again, and we're going to do it step by step. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drag out my pixel processor. You will notice there's absolutely nothing going on here. I'm going to go into my inspector, and in my inspector, which by the way, the inspector, no matter what you click on, the inspector window will, what's going on there? Okay, the inspector window will actually, why is it switching to the 2D view? What did I, oh, I see what I did. Okay, just leave it alone. That it's going to give you the information on whatever thing it is that you've clicked on. What am I looking at here? Okay, there's something weird going on. I'm going to pause this for a second and see what's going on. Yeah, I don't know why it was doing it. It was automatically switching for some reason to the 2D view. I just closed those out because we're not really going to be using them right now. Okay, it's going to give you the information for whatever it is that you're highlighting. So in this case, it's a bitmap. You're going to switch it to grayscale, which is going to give me a grayscale version of that. And in this case, I'm looking at the pixel. I keep switching the. Let's stop doing that. Okay. So in order to edit this pixel processor, which currently has nothing in it, we are going to click Edit, and it automatically populates it with this float4 constant, which you can just get rid of. And now we've got a completely blank thing here. Now this is a kind of a graph within a graph. So in order to start working on this, we are going to right-click. I'm going to add a node. This is this exact same process as you're going on in the main graph. But here your options are different. So we have constants, vectors, variables, samplers, casting, which changes something from one to another, operators, that's your math stuff, logical comparison. This is all pretty self-explanatory. What we are going to do is we're going to, well, let's first bring out our samplers, because this is going to be the thing that's actually going to be sending it out to the larger graph. So I'm going to set this as my output node, and that automatically changes the color. So we're going to be processing pixels up in here, And what we end up processing, we're going to shoot here to the sampler, and then the sampler is going to shoot it back out to the main graph. Right, so we got that squared away. Now let's add some more nodes. We're going to need a float2 variable, and we're going to also need a float1 variable. So float2 variable is an x and y, and a float1 variable is just a single digit. So the first thing we're going to need to establish is this thing that we're processing, these pixels we're processing, what is their position? So we're going to get $position. And then the next thing, we're not going to do this right away, but we are going to eventually, since we are going to be animating, we're going to be using time, because that's kind of an integral part of animation. So let's take a look at the position first, just to get a grip of what's going on here. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to set up some system where we can move the position of the bitmap that we're processing. So in order to do that, we're going to need some addition, and we're going to need to take this position and we're going to need to add another float2 to it, because you're going to need to do like with like. So because this is an xy value, we're going to add an xy value to it. So we're going to either need a constant float2 if we're not going to change that, we just want to sort of shift it, you know, by 0.5 in either direction just to have it move. Or if we want to have that as a variable, we can also do that, which is what we're going to do right here. So we're going to get another float2. Now I already made a variable called time. Oh, I just did the wrong. I got a float1 by mistake. Let's get rid of that. We want a float2. What I want is a position variable. So this is a variable with an x and a y value, and we're going to take a look at that in a second. So we're going to take this and we're going to add it to this, and that is going to be our output for now. So basically right now we're just dealing with the position. So let's take a look at this position variable that I made. In order to make variables, you go out to your main graph and you double click on the graph. So just like by highlighting any of these things, you're seeing their information. By double clicking on the main graph, you're seeing the information for the graph overall. And this is where we create input parameters. We can make a new one. So let's just quickly go through how this happens. So I just click the plus sign here to make a new one. Now it automatically puts in something here. This is the identifier. This is a unique identifier. If you're going to be using these, if you're going to be sort of manipulating these materials with code later on, this is the identifier that you're going to use. It doesn't like spaces. Let's put something in there. I can't think of anything. So if I try to enter that, it's going to automatically put an underscore in there. This is where I put my label. So the label is what the end user actually sees. Now the group is, that allows you to make subheadings. So for example, in this water animation we're going to be doing, I have it broken up into water, ripples, and foam. And under each one of those headings, there's a selection of sliders and stuff that, you know, that people can manipulate. But rather than having it as all one big blah chunk, you can actually create subheadings, and this just makes it easier for everybody to deal with. And in fact, you can take a preview of what it will look like in Unity by hitting the preview little thingy here. Oh, and I noticed I actually, and if you want it, so you can change, if you can change this here, like in a month. Sometimes I use this view because it's just graphically easier to deal with. For example, if you create groups, it will have the subheadings in here for you. So once you start getting a lot of variables, it's easier to actually change your defaults in here. And so you can mess around with your defaults, and then if you apply them, they become your defaults. Where did it go? They become your defaults here as well, and get published out when you do it. I actually want this at 0. But I noticed that that got wrong. So I want to change those labels because I created a float 2 and I mixed up my vertical and horizontal labels because I do that a lot. I also have left-right problems. Okay. So let's take a quick look at what's going on with these things. This is your unique identifier. This gives you the type of variable. So you have a whole selection here. If it's float 1, you're going to get a different set of options here than you would if it's a float 2, because they're dealing with different things. So float 2 is basically just a slider. But for example, a float 4 will carry your color information. So all of this stuff changes depending on what is up in here. So this is a float 2 because we want the X, Y, or U, V, or whatever labels you. Oh, look at that! It just. Okay, so this is, I do this all over and hard. Okay. So where were we? Okay, let's take another look at what's going on in here. I think it's double clicking it. It's opening up a new thing. Anyway, okay, so we've done this. Let's publish it out. So I've published this before, so it's giving me the second option. The difference between these two buttons is this one, you actually set the parameters of where you want it published to. So the first time, oh, first I'm publishing out the wrong thing. Let's publish this guy out. The first time you publish it out, it's going to take you through all of this stuff. So yeah, I want to replace it, blah, blah, blah. Once you've done this one time, it gives you the option of going publish with the previous settings as before. So just clicking this the one time takes care of all that other stuff. Okay, so we've published this out. Let's take a gander back in here. Let's turn this off. And let's just, for the moment at least, get rid of our water. How we do battle with my inspector here. And I'm going to need to look at this. Okay, and then this is our test material that we've just published out there. Now, these are your maps, the actual color maps. This is your material. So this is just a list of what's in here. So this is the thing that you would pull out there. All right. So for now, all we did was, I'm so used to working with two screens. This is really infuriating. Okay. If we want to manipulate it, we're going to be looking on the material, and here are our two things. So as I'm changing this number, this number is getting added to the vertical position of that float 2. Ditto the horizontal. Yeah, you can get fancy with this stuff. You can put a time element on this, and you can go to town. That's not what I'm going to be doing today, but go for it. We are going to, just for now, just to take a quick look at the time factor, we're going to use a rotate because it's quick and dirty, and it'll prove the point later on. We're also going to, for the actual water, we're, if memory serves, mostly using waves, and the wave actually incorporates time into it. Why not? Okay, so let's start with time. So instead of having time, we're going to time. So this is, we are going to go to our library, and I started typing the word rotate in here, and this is giving me a rotate position node. This is going to take two pieces of information, and it's going to rotate the pixels in question, the bitmap, whatever you want to call it, to these specifications. So the top thing you can see here, it says position, and the second one is angle. So for our position, we're just going to take this. Now we could, if you just want a straight up position, you could drag that in there, but whatever the result is for your position, you're going to put in there. And then your angle is, notice how these colors match up? Again, like with like, your angle is a single, it's a single number, it's a single float, and that's going to go in there. Now these two things, it's going to rotate it according to this information. So that's what this node does, and it sends it out to the sampler, which then again sends it out to your main graph. So let's publish this out. So we're going to publish with the previous settings. And we're going to take a look and see what happened here. So we can move this back to what we had it. And let's hit play. Oh, now look at that. It's spinning around. And as it's spinning around, I can also change the position. So already we've got some sort of action here. Now, that's all well and good, but I think it's just moving way too fast for my liking. So one more thing we're going to do before we actually switch to the water is we're going to take a look and we are going to slow this down a little bit. So the $ time, it's essentially a timer. Oh, this is another nice thing. If you hold your mouse over these, it tells you what these things do, which is nice. This is essentially a timer. It's basically going tick-tock, tick-tock. In order to slow down the rotation, we want less movement between each tick and each tock. So we're going to get that by multiplying this number by some number less than 0. Or if you want to speed it up, you do the opposite. So we want another variable here, and we're going to get a single float. Because again, just as an example, let's just bring a float 2 in here. If I go like this and I go like this, it does not like that at all. That is an invalid statement. And the reason is because we're trying to mix apples and oranges. This has got two pieces of information. It only really wants one. So we switch this back and it's happy again. There is a way of overcoming these problems, but there are other nodes that deal with it. So you basically daisy chain these what do they call them? They're the castings to cast. So you can cast to float one. So this will switch integers to floats, and then you can also like funnel them down or funnel them up or whatever it is. I don't know what the technical term is, but you can get around that. It just requires more nodes. All right. So I already created a time multiplier here, and time multiplier, if we go back to the main graph, is a simple float 1 where I have a negative and I have a minimum set of -1 and a maximum set of +1, because that's really the only those are the parameters that I would use it as. I've never tried to go higher. It's just for kicks. Let's see what happens if we go higher. It's an experiment. Okay, we'll find out. So I think we're ready to send this out. Let's take a look. No, we're not. Okay. So we're taking this time and we're multiplying it by a number small, well, between 1 and -1. And that now becomes our angle. So this is going to give us more functionality within what's going on with the time. So let's publish this out and come back here. Okay. So, oh, yeah, I'm going to have to fix this for the next one. This is really irritating. So we now have this time multiplier is also showing up in here. Now, as I draw this down, let's bring this down to 0.01. You know, it does this. I've noticed that sometimes if you're like in mid-play, it doesn't take the information. Now you see how it's going slower now? And it didn't, like when I was switching it on the fly, for some reason it didn't. I don't know. I'm not a programmer. But sometimes it does that. See, now it seems to be working. And if I bring it back down, yeah, you see, it's weird. But what it will also do is it'll go in the opposite direction. So if you multiply by a negative number, it's going to spin in the opposite direction. So you see now it's going opposite C's. Let's see what happens when we do 2. It's going to go super fast. Well, it's not happening with that. Let's turn it off, do this, let's see what happens. Yeah, it doesn't look to me like it's going above 1. So I guess that experiment was a failure. Anyway, that pretty much covers sort of the conceptual basics of pixel processor. So this can be as simple or as complicated as you want it to be. And essentially, when we're making the water, all we're doing is we are taking a bunch of these different animations and we are layering them one on top of the other. So that's what we're going to start working on next.